off, but welcome everyone. My name is Drake Turner. I'm the policy manager at Let's Grow Kids, and I'm joined by some great co-presenters to talk about the childcare is essential priority of the Alliance. So I'm just gonna ask the rest of our co-presenters to introduce themselves, and then I'll get the screen share started for the presentation. So Sarah, do you wanna introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Kenny. I'm the Chief Policy Officer at Let's Grow Kids, and I'm so happy to see you all. Welcome.
Jen, you're up.
Hi everyone, I'm Jen Horowitz. I'm the Policy and Research Director with Let's Grow Kids. Let's Grow Kids, and it's so good to see all of you this morning.
Great. And Sonia, I'm gonna turn it over to you to get us started and introduce yourself.
Excellent. Hi, I'm Sonia Raymond. I'm the Executive Director for Vermont AUIC. Thank you all for joining us. This is a super powerful group of folks, I can tell by looking at the list of participants. We're very excited to have you all here today. I just wanted to ask that all of you please introduce yourselves in the chat, because it's just going to be a quicker way for us to get to know you a little bit. If you could just say who you are and what your role is, that would be terrific. Also want to say that if you have any questions, you can about anything that we're presenting, we do ask, we won't be answering those questions as we go along through the presentation, but we will have a question and answer section at the end. So you can just, as we're rolling and you think of questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. And we have somebody who's monitoring those so that when we get to the Q&A section, thank you, Stephanie, we'll be able to answer those for you. So just want to briefly go through the agenda here. We're just doing welcome and introductions. We're going to step into an overview of H171, the bill in the House, and how it fits into a larger 3-year plan or campaign. And then we'll go over the key components of that bill, and then specifically where the bill is at this point in the legislative session. And we'll move into that Q&A section that I talked about, and then we'll have a small amount of time to do breakout groups and talk about advocacy moving forward. So I'm going to turn it over at this point and leave to Sarah.
Hi everyone, thanks for introducing yourselves in the chat as we go. This is what I'm coming to think of as the no duh slide in my head this morning. I don't need to tell all of you that childcare is essential. What is powerful right now is that the COVID-19 pandemic has really helped the rest of the universe to appreciate that childcare is essential, including policymakers. So we're here to talk this morning about the 3-year campaign that Let's Grow Kids just launched, and H171, which is the bill that is kicking off that campaign. So we're going to dive right in and talk first about why we're here. None of these numbers will surprise any of you, but it's important to keep talking about where we're starting, right? And this was even before the pandemic, that 3 out of 5 of Vermont's youngest children didn't have access to the childcare that they need. That Vermont families have been spending nearly 30% of their income on childcare, often even more than that. And that's even with state support in many cases. That the median annual income for Vermont early childhood educators is $27,600, often without benefits. And that these conditions are unsustainable. This is what we call a crisis. It's not sustainable for families. It's not sustainable for the critical early childhood educators who are the backbone of our economy in many ways. And so we need to change that. And these are some of the problems that H171 is aiming to address. So let's look at the next slide here. So in order to try to tackle this problem, Let's Grow Kids has been looking at all the incredible work that has happened, including by many of you over the past many years, with the Blue Ribbon Commission on financing high quality affordable childcare, the work led by Building Bright Futures that many of us participated in over the past few years with Building Vermont's Future from the Child Up, sort of visioning a future childcare system, the think tank that convened 2 years ago now to think about what should the details of that vision look like, And so we've been taking all of that research and great thinking and visioning that many of you have been engaged with over the years and looking at how do we take this moment where we have true momentum, where everyone from the president to mayors to select boards to all of us, every family basically talking about, we need to figure out childcare. How do we take that momentum and build on all the great work that's happened? Which is why in January, we launched a 3-year campaign, and many of you were with us for the development of that campaign and for our launch in January. So we have a 3-year plan here. In 2021, which is this year, I can't believe we're already in March of 2021, we pass H171, and we'll be talking in a minute about the details of that bill. So this is a bill that lays the foundation of our future childcare system by establishing state goals for childcare affordability, access, and quality, principally driven by the early childhood educators in those programs, and makes immediate investments into the system right now. In 2022, we are going to support some stakeholder processes that are put in place by H171. We'll be continuing to work on legislation to implement some of the components that are in H171, and through our newly formed Let's Grow Kids Action Network, which was just launched as a sister organization for Let's Grow Kids. We're going to be organizing in communities next year to support legislators who have been champions for childcare in the 2022 elections next year, so that we can make sure that when 2023 rolls around, we have, as a state, elected champions for childcare, so that in 2023, we can fully implement these goals, fully implement affordability, access, quality, and accountability measures, and implement funding, a funding resource that will support all of these goals. So that's our 3-year plan. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the details of H171. So this plan is moving us towards this place where together we're creating an equitable childcare system that's affordable, that's high quality, that's accessible, accountable, and sustainable. And we're going to be talking through a slide each about each of these top priorities for H171 and for our vision, our collective vision for this future system. So Drake is going to talk a little bit about the affordability priority.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so we're going to briefly go through this. There will be an opportunity for questions, but we really want to make sure we have enough time to break into smaller groups to talk through this. So I'm going to try not to talk too quickly, but affordability, super important. We don't need to tell you all this. We know that families are paying too much for care, and it's not a sustainable way to have a really equitable childcare system in Vermont. So the goal of our 3-year campaign that we're driving towards is to achieve an early childhood education system in Vermont where no family will spend more than 10% of their income on childcare. And in many cases, the vision is that families will actually be spending less, much less than 10%. So this year, we are taking important steps toward achieving that goal. It is not the year to have it fully happen, but we can do really important things this year in H171 to put us on the path toward true affordability in Vermont. One of the really exciting things about the bill is that it establishes this goal, this 10% goal, in statute as the intent of the legislature to pursue affordability with that 10% vision. And in the shorter term, what the bill does is it essentially continues the redesign of the Child Care Financial Assistance Program. We're in 3 of the 5-year redesign that was passed by the legislature 2 years ago, or I guess 3 years ago. But there's important investment this year in affordability and expanding eligibility for the Child Care Financial Assistance Program, and in making care more affordable for families that participate in CCFAP. That's also outlined in the governor's budget, but it's in H171 as well. And the bill also calls on the state to study
Shoot, I think Drake's having some connectivity.
For early childhood educators is included. So we're really excited to start that conversation and to really pursue that. And I'm also seeing that my internet connection is unstable. I think this is the exact moment that happened the last session. So if anyone's having issues seeing this slide, please let someone know in the chat. But that's affordability boiled down very quickly. And I'm going to turn things over to Sonia next to talk about quality.
Thank you, Drake. So I'm going to talk about the quality piece. As we know, quality is basically driven by the early childhood educators that are working in programs. And so we have some targeted resources in the bill that address the quality aspect in 3 different ways. 2 of those are for the, I'll call it incumbent workforce, those currently in the workforce, to help them attain credentials and degrees that they are looking to achieve. And the third is for those who are interested in associate's or bachelor's degree, not necessarily currently working in the workforce, but agreeing to work within the field after. So the first would be a loan repayment piece where this would be targeted for folks who currently have their associate's or bachelor's degree, and they've achieved that within the last 5 years. So it's the newer folks with those degrees. It would give them up to $4,000 per year of loan repayment on their behalf. And those are for folks, again, that are currently working in early childhood programs, 30 hours or more, and have received their degree in the last 5 years. And we also have scholarships, currently teach scholarships for, again, folks who are working 30 hours or more in the workforce currently in early childhood programs. This money is targeted for sustainability of that program, as well as adding a bachelor's scholarship, so that ultimately we have entry point of being able to achieve, we have an apprenticeship scholarship, a associate scholarship, we have a bachelor's scholarship, and a licensure, teacher licensure scholarship. So we have the full gamut afforded through this. And then the third piece is that piece around, it's prospective for folks who are minimally choosing to major and get their degree, associates or bachelor's in early childhood or early childhood special ed. This would be a scholarship program that would pay up to their full tuition. And they would in turn then be agreeing to some years of service in early childhood programs in Vermont after those scholarships. So those are the 3 quality pieces of this bill. I think, Sarah, back to you.
Thanks, Sonia. So the third priority in our 3-year plan, and this one is actually reflected in the governor's budget, is accessibility. So the goal is that every child will have access to high quality childcare when and where they need it. We know that we have a dramatic shortage of childcare in the state of Vermont, even pre-pandemic. So the good news is that the governor's proposed budget continues state investment in childcare capacity development. Many programs, even who are with us this morning, have been able to expand slots in their programs. We've been able to support new programs opening around the state with the investments that the state has made, the administration and the legislature have made in the last couple of years in capacity development. Let's Grow Kids has partnered with the state through the Make Way for Kids grant program to be administering some of those funds. And they've already started to make a really big difference in terms of the level of capacity in the state. And we have so much further to go to make sure that there is adequate capacity for every child in the state who needs childcare. So the good news is that the governor's budget continues with those investments. And then priority 4 is accountability. So the goal is that the system will have well-coordinated and transparent governance, administrative, and accountability structures and resources to support all of that. So H171 focuses on this priority in 3 different ways. The first is investing in the Bright Futures Information System redesign. And the good news is that this is also in the governor's budget. So this is you hear us talk at Let's Grow Kids a lot about the IT system that underpins the childcare system, which is pretty terrifically outdated. And I think I've heard the commissioner use the term rickety a number of times in testimony to refer to the current Bright Futures information system. Definitely makes life difficult for programs, for families, and especially for the folks at CDD who are administering the program and having to use this outdated information infrastructure. So this would invest in an update to the Bright Futures information system, which is already underway, and the governor's budget and 171 both include funding for a full replacement for the Bright Futures information system, which is exciting. H171 also convenes stakeholders to advise the child care system. So we have Building Bright Futures in the state, which supports a number of committees through the Vermont Early Childhood Action Plan that are working to convene stakeholders and advise state entities, the legislature and the administration about early childhood issues more broadly and specifically on childcare. H171 would take the Early Learning and Development Committee at Building Bright Futures and support that committee to have a very specific role in all of this work moving forward under H171. Would specify additional membership for that group and give them a more formalized role in advising the administration and the legislature and reporting back on all of the components that are proposed in H171 and so the regulation of the child care system. And that Building Bright Futures is supported to do that through H171. The other really important piece in H171 is studying the current governance and administrative structures and making recommendations to strengthen and streamline those. So H171 includes a study, the systems analysis study is what it's called in the version of the bill that just passed the Human Services Committee. And that would be supported by Building Bright Futures through a consultant. And there are national consultants that do this kind of work where they come into a state and look at all of our existing governance structures for early childhood education, see what's working well, where are the connections working well, where are the gaps, and what additional resources are needed. So that analysis would be happening over the course of the next 18 months and really looking at what changes, if any, are needed to the way that we're administering early childhood education in the state. And make recommendations back to the legislature and the administration, and would also be including stakeholder voices through that committee that I just talked about to be advising some of that work. So those are the accountability provisions. And I'm going to turn it over to Jen to talk about priority 5.
Thanks, Sarah. So the final priority with H171 is determining how do we achieve stable long-term funding for the system. So this is done through a study that is created to look at both what is the cost of providing high quality, affordable childcare. So when we put all the components together that everyone else has talked about thus far, what is that number? And then the other piece of that study is then, so how do we pay for it? What are sustainable financing mechanisms that can allow us to have long-term stable funding to ensure the future success of our early childhood education system?
Great, thanks, Jen. Sorry, had to find my unmute. So that's the snapshot of the 3-year campaign and of how H171 fits in. And Sarah and I are going to give a brief update on what's happening with the bill, but I do just want to show this slide briefly to talk about sort of like a summary of what we all just talked about, which is that, you know, H171 outlines and discusses these sort of longer term goals that we're building towards while making shorter term investments. So we have, you know, our goals of making childcare more affordable for all Vermont families that need it, fairly compensating and advancing Vermont's early childhood education workforce, and expanding access to high quality childcare throughout the state. Those are our 3 just really core goals of our campaign and that H171 is driving toward. And then in the shorter term this year, the bill makes more immediate investments in IT and CCFAP, which are also included in the governor's budget. And there are also some really important shorter term investments in stabilizing and advancing the childcare workforce that we need right now so that we can be in a good position to make the bigger investments we know are needed for compensation for that crucial workforce And the bill also proposes to launch the 2 studies that Sarah and Jen mentioned, really dig deeper into what does it mean to govern this system and how do we fund it. So those are the main components here. And then a brief update on H171. I'm going to talk about some things that have just happened, and then Sarah is going to give us a little preview of what's to come. But we're really just so excited about this bill, about the momentum that it has, about the support that it has. And that really is all because of the work that you've all done for years to show to your legislators and in your communities how important the early childhood education system is in Vermont. And really as a result of all of that work that you've all done, this bill has a lot of support. When it was introduced, about a month, 2 months ago? What is time? I don't know. But it was introduced with 95 co-sponsors in the House, which is a really significant show of support for this bill. And that's across all parties, including Democrats, Republicans, independents, progressives. There's broad and really deep support for this bill. And yesterday, we had a really exciting moment where the bill actually passed out of the House Human Services Committee unanimously. And that committee has done really deep, intentional, thoughtful work on this bill for the past month, I would say, I think, to make sure that it is strong and reflective of needs right now, and also putting us on a path to solving this bigger issue in the future. So we're really excited to continue to work on the bill. And Sarah is going to give us a very quick preview of what's to come, because this is an important step, but it is really the first step of many. So Sarah, do you want to speak to our future here?
Sure thing. I'm also going to just drop in the chat a link to the House calendar for today, and have I'm a policy dork, so every day when the full House of Representatives and the Senate convene together, they have a calendar that tells them what they're up to when they're all gathered together, and it has a notice section of things that are headed their way soon. So I've just dropped a link to the House calendar for today, which is the one place where you can see the language of H171 that actually just passed the Human Services Committee yesterday. So if you open that link and scroll down to the second page under the notice calendar, you'll see under favorable with amendment, H171, and there's the page number 247 is blue, so you can link right to it in the calendar, and that will take you to the full bill. And generally speaking, language that's underlined is being added, and language that is stricken through is being deleted. And anything that doesn't have any of those things is existing law that they're changing or just restating in the bill. So if you really want to dive deep into the weeds, that's where you can do it. And there will be better, it'll be posted online in different, more readable ways soon, but that's the place to see it today. So as Drake said, the work of the House Human Services Committee has been terrific and is the first of many steps in the legislative process here. So the bill has appeared on the notice calendar, which is letting the full House of Representatives know that it has passed a committee and is headed their way soon. The bill we expect will be considered by the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee in the coming days. That is somewhat an unusual committee to be looking at a child care bill, but that committee has really been diving deeply into over the last couple of years into thinking about how the early childhood education workforce supports every other workforce in the state. And so whenever they focus on workforce development, they're also thinking about what do we need to do about childcare to make sure all these workers are available. And also thinking about childcare as an economic development engine in the state. So we're excited that they're going to be talking about the bill. They'll probably be focusing on the components related to the early childhood education workforce that Sonia talked about. So they'll be looking at it. The House Ways and Means Committee will also be taking a look at the bill. That's the committee that raises the revenue for the state, and the Appropriations Committee figures out how to spend it. And so the Finance Committee will be looking at the Ways and Means Committee, right? Really looking at the financing study component of the bill, and then it will have to go to appropriations. And as we mentioned, a number of the provisions in H171 are in the governor's budget, but the bill overall has about $13 million of expenditures, and so the Appropriations Committee will be comparing that to what's in the just over $8 million that's in the governor's budget. Actually closer to 9 million, I guess, that's in the governor's budget. And we'll be figuring out, how to fund the bill. So then it would go to the full House of Representatives, which we expect to happen in the next 2 weeks. There's a deadline this Friday, day after tomorrow, by which all bills need to have passed out of their policy committees of jurisdiction on the House and the Senate so that they can get to the House and Senate floor and then cross over to the other chamber so that the other body has time to consider the bill. So that deadline is this Friday. So H171 will have had to pass all the policy committees by this Friday, which it seems on track to do, and then will be considered by the Appropriations Committee next week. They have an extra week for the deadline for bills with funding in them. And then it will go to the full House. And then assuming it passes the full House, which it definitely will, because you all have been working so hard and will continue to over the next couple of weeks to get in touch with legislators about how important this is. Once it passes the House, then it goes over to the Senate and we do the whole thing all over again. So your voices have been so critically important over the last number of years and over the last couple of months to really support legislators in appreciating how critically important this issue is, what a great bill this is, why it had 95 co-sponsors, which is unprecedented in this virtual environment, especially where it's so hard for legislators to connect with each other. And it's why we think there's the momentum to carry this bill all the way through, but it's definitely going to take work on all of our part to make sure that at every step of this process, that the legislators working with the bill understand how important this is to folks in their communities. So that's our next steps.
Great. All right. I am going to go ahead and stop my share right now. So we wanted to give a little bit of space here if folks have any questions right now. I have not seen the chat, so I don't know if anything has come in. And then we want to move into our breakout groups so that we can talk more about how to discuss this with legislators at lunch.
So Drake, one question that did come in over the chat was about whether student loan repayment support is considered taxable income. The short answer is it depends what the amount is. The IRS has different rules about this. We encourage everyone to consult with your personal tax professional. I did include a link to the IRS's website with more information about their differentiation in between when kind of that threshold, where that threshold is and what does that mean. But it is, since there are varying federal rules about that, we really encourage everyone to kind of consult with whomever it is that you talk to about your taxes to figure out what that would mean for you. The way the program is structured, it can provide a maximum benefit, but it's really tailored based on each individual's own student loan debt. So the answer is going to vary person to person.
All right, and folks will also have the opportunity to ask any questions in our breakout group. So I think probably what makes the most sense now so that we have enough time.
Sorry, I do want us to have enough time there. I just wanted to quickly answer a question that came up actually in our last session, but I think is out there in the ether. So I just wanted to let folks know that there was another bill that was introduced this week. That's H394, which is essentially a bill that would implement the governor's recommendation around moving the Child Development Division into the Agency of Education and different departments within the Agency of Human Services. Many of you may have heard that the governor proposed this for discussion purposes in his budget address, and has spoken to folks in the field about it. So the bill that was just introduced this week would implement those components. It was just introduced this week, and as I said, the crossover deadline is day after tomorrow, and no committee has plans to take that bill up right now, so it is highly unlikely that it will actually go anywhere this year. And as we discussed, H171, which is the child care bill that we've all been working on, does have the systems analysis study in it, which was contemplated long before the governor's proposal came out, but is really looking at comprehensively what's working and where are the gaps in our administration of early care and education in Vermont and what needs to change. So we're really looking at that as a way to get at this question of what's the best structure and what do we need to put in place to make sure that stakeholder voices are a part of the conversations and are part of the system in the future. So just so folks know, there are two separate bills out there, and H394 is not likely to move at this point in the session. And so H171 is the vehicle that's moving, and that does contain the systems analysis study. I should also say that the legislature has not been super excited. The legislative committees who have talked about the governor's proposal have not been very enthusiastic about it yet. So, so I don't expect that bill to be moving in the next week. Sorry, Drake, to interrupt you. I just wanted to get that one out there.
No, I'm glad you mentioned it. Thanks, Sarah.
And
Sorry, go
Drake,
ahead, Jen.
sorry, there's one more question that came in about whether education loans, so just to clarify, it's student loan repayment support would work for programs that may not be terminal degrees, such as a Montessori teaching certificate. So Sarah or Sonia, I'm not sure if you want to answer that.
Sorry, Jen, that was about the loan repayment support?
I believe so.
The scholarships. The way that the bill is structured, it's specific to degrees in early childhood education and related fields like family and child development, and a limited number of degrees. And if you want to read all the details about it, probably the best place right now is actually that House calendar document that I sent around. Section 6 of the bill lays out the two scholarship programs and the loan repayment, and gives more detail about what sort of who would be eligible and what they would do. And I just want to acknowledge that these are first steps, and H171 is working within a pretty, it's a huge investment for the state of Vermont to date of $13 million, but in the scope of what's needed, pretty small investment. So H171 is looking at what can we do with the resources that are available now, and building this place for 2023, where we're infusing much bigger amounts of resources and we're able to really increase wages and supports for early childhood educators, benefits, all of these pieces. And we're also looking at, in the meantime, there's a whole bunch of federal funding that's about to be flowing into Vermont for childcare. So how can we be leveraging some of those dollars to be supporting short-term wage support programs, other professional development support for people? So just so folks know that the pieces in H171 are a really important starting place, and it's not going to get at everything that everybody needs right now, because we are in the midst of a pandemic.